For Ole Miss to compete for a national title in December, the work starts now, and especially this spring. We'll tell you the top 5 storylines that people need to pay attention to, and the Ole Miss coaching staff has wrapped up its search. We'll tell you who that is in just a second. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, I'm Stephen Willis, a former staff member at Ole Miss and a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports. Also did a little bit of time at WSMV. Today on the show, we talk about Ole Miss filling its coaching staff out with Joe Cox, the former Alabama staffer, and we look at the 5 most important things to watch for in spring practice. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day, and a special hello to the everydayers who make the show what it is. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today and you'll get $200 back in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. All right, it's really interesting stuff. And Ole Miss has announced, well, not necessarily announced, but it's been reported, and Joe Cox is out recruiting and all of that. And Joe Cox is really the person that broke the news himself by tweeting out this picture with everybody knows that color blue means something. Joe Cox was announcing there just minutes before everybody picked up on him being hired, maybe because of this photo, that he got the job. Really, really impressive stuff. When you look at Joe Cox, he was an Alabama assistant tight ends coach last year. Before that, he was in Charlotte. I think before that, he might have been at Colorado State and South Carolina. He's kind of been all over the place, but he's been a journeyman guy. If that name sounds familiar, by the way, Joe Cox, I believe he was Matthew Stafford's backup at the University of Georgia. He was a Georgia quarterback. He was a National Player of the Year, if I'm not mistaken. Much ballyhooed quarterback that ended up not winning the job, but he's coaching tight ends. And at Alabama, he was able to get such players as Caleb Odom, who Ole Miss finished second on, and we will be paying attention to for the next couple of weeks to see what happens as he goes through spring practice and all that stuff. Odom may decide to transfer to the coach that kind of recruited him and also to the school that finished second. So there's like a lot of cards in Ole Miss's favor at the moment. Joe Cox getting the job as a tight ends coach, this is a big upgrade. John David Baker is a really great coach, but he's been gone since December. You have set up your staff in such a way that is quite interesting. One of the recruiters in Mississippi, there's 2 guys that are going to be key in the state of Mississippi that is going to replace the work that Derek Nix did, and that was Pete Golding and Brian Brown. With Brian Brown coming back in, he can kind of fill that role as well. Kelvin Bolden, who a lot of people were worried that he needed to get an on-field coaching job or he was going to leave, I have it on fairly good authority. He's going to be sticking around for a while. He just loves working for Coach Kiffin. And Kelvin Bolden, Pete Golding, and Brian Brown in the state of Mississippi, nobody needs to worry about recruiting in the state of Mississippi. Nobody, not a single person in the world. So all in all, I think this works out pretty well. I think this is a situation, if you look at the staff top to bottom, Kiffin has upgraded the totality of the staff yet again. Much like he has done to the roster at large, he's done with the coaching staff as well. He's probably done that with the analysts, with the sports staff. Lots of Ole Miss roles are being upgraded at the moment. And this is important to me. And, everybody's like, well, Derek Nix is going. He's the Mississippi recruiting guy. I'm worried about recruiting. It's like, I hear you. I get that. And recruiting is always the lifeblood of college football. But my concentration right now is about maximizing 2024. I want the best schemers and coaches that you can get to coach the talent we already have. and figure out a way with the pieces that we have to go get more talent later. But that's not the important thing. So weird for an Ole Miss fan to think like that. So weird for an Ole Miss fan to see a season that way. But 2024 to me is about maximizing it. It's about getting the most out of it. And if Joe Cox is a better fit for Kedrick Reescano and Daquan Wright and Hudson Wolf, so be it. All I know is that Joe Cox got the job when Tommy Rees was the offensive coordinator in Alabama. And the reason that's important, the tight ends were a very important piece of the offense that Tommy Rees was running. I'm not saying the Alabama offense was particularly good. I'm saying that hire with Nick Saban denotes how good of a coach that Joe Cox probably is. And now they can get to work. Now that the staff is completed to the totality, Junior Day is 5 days away. Some big names are going to be on campus, including Marquez Walker. We'll talk about him as the week progresses as well. But you have a chance to put them together. You're starting to look at film, starting to look at depth chart, starting to go into, and I don't care what anybody says. The coaches are going to tell the kids they're not going out to practice with a preconceived notion. They're walking out with exactly what they think is going to happen. It's their job to prove them either right or wrong. And Joe Cox is going to be able to sit in front of film. They're going to be doing some recruiting during this month, but I guarantee you he has an iPad as well. And on all of his downtime, he's sitting here thinking about what could happen and tight end wise, Kedrick Reescano and how to use him. How does he complement Daquan Wright? How does Hudson Wolf fit into this situation? And him probably already getting to meet George McDonald, who we talked about yesterday, who was the passing game coordinator, in a way to put all of the wide receivers and tight ends together. And then Charlie Weiss Jr. and then Lane Kiffin. That's how the offense is built. And that's what's going to be a major key along the way. I'm pretty excited about this whole deal. Joe Cox, we talked about Joe Cox for weeks on this show and other shows as well. I mean, it's not like it's a big secret or anything was going on. George McDonald was the surprise. And I don't know how it's going to go. We're waiting to see who replaces Austin Thomas. And Austin Thomas, yes, he's a very important piece. He is not a winning piece necessarily. He is somebody that can be replaced. The system's been in place for 2 years. It will be fairly easy for somebody that is highly in the Ole Miss system that's seen how it works to move up into that position. I think somebody potentially, like I said, whenever we talk about this going on, I think Kelvin Bolden might be potentially in line for that position. If he's not, he's not. No, but like I said, anybody that is sure what happens with a Lane Kiffin coaching hire, whenever they're extremely confident, odds are they're wrong. And that's just the way it works out. Joe Cox is a really good football coach, though. Joe Cox and George McDonald both are home run hires. And if you look at the totality of the staff, it is potentially unlike anyone that has come before. I've talked about this football team, saying that this is the most talented Ole Miss football team in my lifetime. This is probably the best coaching staff in my lifetime as well. Ole Miss is acting like a big boy. They just genuinely are. They are acting like a big boy. Now, they still need to go out and win like a big boy. Okay? Winning 11 games last year, that was good. That was fine. They still need to go win like a big boy this year. They need to host that playoff game or make it into the Final Four. Somewhere in there should be the goal of this team. To where at this point, if Ole Miss does not make the playoff in 2024, the season is an abject failure. Now, I'm not saying you have to be a fan. I'm not saying you have to walk around and stamp your feet. I'm talking about being realistic about what's going on. You can't have this level of expectations and then underachieve and then all of a sudden move the goalpost to where that's okay. You can't do that. Next year is going to have the highest expectations for Ole Miss since 1963, maybe 1964. And Ole Miss is going to have to learn to function at an extremely high level dealing with those expectations. One of the best things that Nick Saban did while at the University of Alabama was he was able to handle this, and they were able to function at an extremely high level to where it just looked almost robotic. And that's one of the most impressive things that Nick Saban was able to do. Ole Miss is still learning how to do that. If you want any keys of why that could be difficult, Ole Miss wins the national championship in baseball in 2022. Yes, I get injuries. I get all of that stuff. The next year they won 6 conference games. And that's a combination of misfortune hitting the Ole Miss roster and also everybody taking Ole Miss and playing them as the national champion. It matters. It's like people that don't think that momentum exists in football, and they think there are no consequences in a game other than just a straight down. All they see is a down where you're required to get 3 yards. That is what it is. Nobody is taken into account the bump that the stadium's going to get. The confidence is going to be depressed by the offensive team. The defensive team, the confidence going to go up. That is going to flip everything around. And you saw that in the NFC Championship game where one go for it on 4th down or 4th and 3, instead of kicking a field goal to make it a 3-score game, it just completely snowballed to the point where just a few minutes later, the game was tied and they ended up losing the football game. Absolutely nuts stuff. So Joe Cox gets the job as the tight ends coach for Ole Miss. George McDonald, like we told you yesterday, passing game coordinator, wide receivers coach. And I'm pretty fired up about all of that, as you can tell by my voice. Thanks again for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day. We're just getting started. Next is the 5 most important storylines going into spring for Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. You know, if you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. My favorite part about the Super Bowl is the fact that it goes on for like 14 hours. I actually really enjoy that. Some people are in for the commercials. Some people like the actual game. I'm a Saints fan, so other than one game, the game hasn't really mattered that much for me. But the fact that it is kind of America's holiday, America's real holiday, and I like the fact that I think during this Super Bowl, they're going to do a documentary on the NFL Today and Brett Musburger in the early part of the day. And I'm looking forward to seeing that. And those type things are really interesting to me. Now, I don't particularly care if any of the hosts or anything like that, they're getting extra time or whatever, but the extra add-on shows that they do earlier in the day is really cool. FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a W or 2 or 3. Not only can you bet on who will win Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets for which player will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, what color Gatorade is going to be dunked on the winning coach, and so much more. New customers join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bet if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Now, this is a big deal, and we're going into basically a playoff run. And everything about a playoff run in the fall, it seems like it's very far away. But the reality is there's some stuff that needs to happen and some stuff that we need to follow over the next couple of months to make sure that we are going where we're going. April 15th through the 30th, the secondary transfer portal window is going to open. I expect Ole Miss to look for a running back. I expect Ole Miss to look for an edge because it does look like BJ Green is going to end up in Colorado as well. But there are some players on campus and some things to keep an eye on that everybody needs to see. Number one, Jaxson Dart. And I just named him on this case because it's a legit thing. Jaxson Dart needs to progress like he did from year 1 to year 2 and now to year 2 to year 3. if he makes the jump that is expected of him, the offense is going to function at an extremely high level. And the offense performing at that high level is going to be a big key for Ole Miss moving forward. Now, we can talk about the defense. We can talk about everything that's going on, but it's singularly important that Jaxson Dart makes that jump and becomes the quarterback that he was in the Penn State game, in the LSU game, in the Texas A&M game, full time. That needs to become a full-time thing for Jaxson Dart if Ole Miss is going to be as good as we expect them to be. Now, number two, Chris Graves and Trey Amos. Like, it's not just names that I'm giving out on this. There's situations and things like that. But Chris Graves and Trey Amos, there's a couple of things that they're going to need to have to figure out. First off, I do think one of these are going to be the starting quarterbacks. I think Umanmielen Walker is going to be in the mix as well. I'm not saying that he won't, but I think these are the two leaders in the clubhouse to be starters. Now, we have to decide who is the field corner, who's the boundary corner. We have to determine man coverage abilities and if they can do it. Trey Amos is really good at man coverage. Chris Graves played against the Georgia Bulldogs because they knew they were going to need to man cover a little bit. Chris Graves taking a step in year two in the system will be very important. Trey Amos picking up the defense is going to be very important as well. Trey Amos, while he's played for Kevin Steele in the Alabama system, he has not played in the same defense that Pete Golding runs. So there will be some stuff that they need to learn. So we need to see if they can do the man coverage. They need to be good enough to press the wide receivers that Ole Miss has to make them a little better. The wide receivers need to make them a little bit better. But this defensive back position is going to be absolutely key for Ole Miss football in the spring. Number three is Kedrick Reescano. As simple as that. You're going to go into spring with basically two running backs, Ulysses Bentley, who you know you have in that situation, and Kedrick Reescano, who does not have a college carry to his name, but everybody loves him, and he has a chance to be really, really good. So this spring, he has a chance to tote the rock a little bit, has a chance to get comfortable in the system and everything. So if for some reason Ole Miss is not able to get their guy after the spring transfer portal window, there's a little bit of comfortability for Kedrick Reescano. Like I said, Logan Diggs, I think that's a playoff. I've told you all along, I think that transfer portal acquisition is for the playoff. As an ideal, they want to get to the postseason and have games left over to where he does not burn a year of eligibility and still gets to play. That has been my opinion for a while. We'll see if it actually comes to fruition a little bit as well. But Kedrick Reescano, learning the offense, getting comfortable, doing the stuff that needs to be done, that is one of the things to look for. If Ole Miss is going to make a playoff run, Kedrick Reescano has a really big spring. Seriously. Number four, the offensive line leaders need to emerge. Now, Julius Buelow and Nate Kalepo just came in from the Washington Huskies, the Joe Moore Award-winning offensive line Washington Huskies. That's 40% of that offensive line into town. 2 out of the 5 units are starters on Ole Miss's roster. Ole Miss lost Quincy McGee and Victor Kern. So you might look at it as a 2 for 2, but also remember Ole Miss brought in Diego Pounds and Jerquan Scott. So they brought in 4 names. But other than that, Caleb Bourne, Jeremy James, Micah Pettis, Eli Acker, lots of football that has been played, they returned as well. There's also players that Ole Miss is pretty high on in Preston Cushman and Bryson Sanders. You have 10 players for 5 spots. It's going to be massive competition. So leaders need to emerge. Nate Kalepo was listed as the alpha dog by the Joe Moore committee for Washington's offensive line. You have to figure he's a like-for-like type switch with Quincy McGee. Diego Pounds coming in for Victor Kern. So all of a sudden you have a similarity to what the offensive line was last year. Add in Julius Buelow, who is probably going to compete with Jeremy James. Add in Jerquan Scott, who's kind of a Swiss Army knife and can any of them snap the football effectively, because snaps have been Ole Miss's biggest Achilles heel on the O-line for the last 2 years. I don't care what anybody says, what's going on. That's the part of the O-line that I want to see get fixed. And we need to have a situation to where if somebody goes down, it doesn't require a reshuffling of everybody on the offensive line. I think there's enough bodies to where you can get away with not doing it, but that is something that Ole Miss needs to keep an eye on as well. And I think this will help as well. Number 5, the front 7 must be great, not good, great. And they need to be great from the jump. Now, you have Princely Umanmielen, you have Walter Nolen, J.J. Pegues, Jared Ivey. You have all of the backups in case, Akello Stone, Xavion Harris. DJ Holmes is on the roster as well. I'm expecting him to make a jump this year as well. Ole Miss probably needs one more end because of the BJ Green thing kind of fell through on them as well. You might see them look in that area in the spring. Now, the linebacker position, this is really interesting. You have Poopaw, you have TJ Dudley, you have Suntarine Perkins, you have several players even coming back. You have Tyler Banks coming back. You have a whole lot of positions in that linebacker room to where there's a unit there for 2 spots. Now, you talk about the hybrid role and things that they can do with it. I don't know if that is an option for somebody like Suntarine Perkins. I think Suntarine Perkins might have a chance to sit in beside Pooh Paul. And as Brian Smith said over the weekend, he might have said it on the recording, might have said it off air to me, Suntarine Perkins has a chance to be the SEC Defensive Player of the Year in year 2. That's how much talent he has. This is an important spring for him to pick up what's going on. If that happens, it's only beneficial for Ole Miss's defense. That's 5 things right there. 5 storylines that Ole Miss fans need to keep an eye on as spring practice starts here in about a month and a half. And we're going to talk about that basically every day for the next month and a half or something similar to that. When we come back, we got a lot of great stuff to talk about. Still more to come on the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's basketball Egg Bowl day, and Ole Miss gets the Bullpups at home for round 1. I know we come to sports to escape some of the crazy realities of real life, but can we just talk a minute about preparing for real life? According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. It's kind of scary stuff. I can't imagine a more helpless feeling than if Becky, my wife, got sick while a supply chain issue kept them from receiving life-saving medication that they needed. Thankfully, I'll be okay because I have Jace Medical. A Jace case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinusitis, skin infections, among others. This stuff can happen to any of us. So visit jacemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It'll be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jacemedical.com and use code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, all one word, to get $20 off your order. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day. And shout out to the everydayers. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every league. For your second listen, go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 stream channel. Be part of history. All right, we're going to change gears just a little bit. It is basketball Egg Bowl day, and Ole Miss is going to play Mississippi State for an opportunity for the Rebels to go 18-3. The game is in the Pavilion tonight. We'll be pre-gaming, essentially. I think that's when Shark Tank Live will be in the pre-game of the Ole Miss State game. And as it goes on, we'll see exactly how that goes. But we're planning on doing a Shark Tank Live before them. We'll address some of the stuff. We'll open it up. It may just be me because there's people going to the game that normally would be on the show, and people are interested in that game. It should be really fun indeed. Now, if you look at the player that I think has a chance to have the biggest impact tonight in the basketball egg bowl is Jamin Brakefield. He is averaging 12 points and 5 rebounds per game, 2.1 assists. Jamin Brakefield is playing out of his mind at the moment. He's had games where he's scored 27, 28 points. Ole Miss has shot pretty well at home. They have. And if that happens, I don't know if there's much that Mississippi State can do. Now, I'm expecting Mississippi State to come play well. Mississippi State beat Auburn on the weekend. The same Auburn team that beat Ole Miss by 20 points in Auburn last week. So I'm not saying that this game is going to be easy or anything like that. I'm saying that if Ole Miss comes out and plays like they did against Florida and against Arkansas, Ole Miss should win this ball game. I expect Ole Miss to be a favorite of somewhere around 6 to 7 points. And it will be really interesting to see. I'm looking forward to a Juju Murray versus Josh Hubbard matchup. I want to see what that looks like. And the front court stuff, even though Ole Miss is rebounding a little bit better and they're a little bit more physical on that end and preventing offensive rebounds, Ole Miss is going to have to take care of the glass in this game because Ole Miss gets in trouble when teams get 2 and 3 bites at the apple. They D up and they can force you to miss some shots, but they need to be able to rebound the basketball. If Ole Miss can do that, I think they will win the game fairly comfortably. But we'll see exactly what happens. This game is unlike the football game to where it can be a little bit uncertain. And basketball games do have a chance to get a little bit weird. And we'll see exactly how that goes. I'm expecting a ton of people to show up in the pavilion. I think it's already a sellout for the Auburn game, but I'm expecting a lot of people to show up for the Mississippi State game as well before Ole Miss goes on the road to South Carolina and Kentucky. We will have Tim Thomas tomorrow to talk about this game and the Texas A&M game. This week, we'll also have John Forcade. He's scheduled. John Forcade is scheduled to be on the show, and Mike Detilliak. So I'm really fired up about that, both of which they will be on to talk essentially about Jaxson Dart in the quarterback position and some of the talent for Ole Miss moving forward. So I'm pretty fired up about that. John probably doesn't remember it at all, but I did meet him, I guess, 15 years ago, 2005, whenever he came to the announcement of Ed Orgeron getting the head coaching job. I met John Forcade that weekend as well. So it should be pretty fun. I'm looking forward to tonight in the basketball game. This is a game that if Ole Miss can get to 18-3, it's a win. 1-1 this week should be the goal. They've got that margin of error after they beat Texas A&M. But if Ole Miss can win both this game and get to 19-3, all of a sudden we need to start changing our conversation a little bit. I'm not saying that Ole Miss is national championship good. And we saw what happened when Ole Miss played on the road against Tennessee and Auburn. They're not there. But Ole Miss is good. This is potentially an NCAA tournament team. And if Ole Miss can go 2-0 this week, it doesn't matter if they drop a game at Rupp Arena. They probably are. It doesn't matter if they drop a game in the Colonial Life Center. They probably are. If they're 19-3 after this weekend, I'm just going to say it. Ole Miss is just playing for seeding at that point. They're going to make the NCAA tournament. So we'll see exactly how that goes as well. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day as we continue to turn our attention to spring practice storylines. And we also look at basketball and start baseball coverage as well. For your second listen, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every league. For your second listen, go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 stream channel. For those of you on YouTube, we'll send you there right now. Hotty toddy.